Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2. And tonight I am very, very glad to welcome back to the channel Bill Taylor. Bill Taylor of dstateanalytics.com, a very, very valuable blog and author of a couple of books now that are, I think they're mainly collections of your blogs, but they're very, very well illustrated and a joy to have in your hand. Bill Taylor, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. It's getting, November 30th, right? So we're heading into the home stretch towards Christmas and New Year's, and here it is, Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. And we're uh, heading into that dark time that we've been a little bit scared of. I mean, we talk about in this fall when we were approaching this, and people were using words like dark winter and variants and things like that. I don't want to go there with the variants, but I do want to just say it is that time of year when the winter of our discontent kind of comes to mind. Um, Nevertheless, we did have a little good news here in Charles County, Maryland today. The Circuit Court ruled that the county cannot order cannot have a mask mandate without going through a legislative process. So it was like the county commission ordered everybody had to wear masks, and some citizens got together and fought it, and the court said you win. So now they have to go back to the drawing board, prepare some legislation, and then go through the legislation process to try to do it. And hopefully this will be the end of it. But thank goodness for citizen activism, and the people that did that performed a great public service, in my opinion. So that's pretty cool. What's going on with you up in New Jersey?
Well, it's been relatively quiet. Phil Murphy won again. Won is in quotes. He managed to pull out some late night votes in a couple of the reliably corrupt counties up in North Jersey and in the Camden County. So there was a lot of disappointment there. The challenger, Jack Citarelli, who was pretty impressive in some of the debates, he folded pretty quickly. And he was a Chris Christie picked guy. So there was a decent amount of reluctance to support him, but everybody got behind Jack as soon as it became clear that when he won the primary. Nevertheless, he did exactly what everybody thought he would do as a milquetoast Republican from New Jersey. The New Jersey GOP is the New York Jets of the National Republican Party, the perennial losers, and I'm a Jets fan. But yeah, Jack folded, and so we're stuck with Murphy. But Murphy's been a little bit more subdued. He might have either gotten a lesson. The Senate President Steve Sweeney, who's been in the New Jersey Assembly since like the 1870s or something like that. He was defeated by a truck driver from his district who spent about $7,000 in social media ads. And that was a very impressive pullout because he unseated this old hack who's been around forever. And so maybe Murphy learned a little bit of a lesson from that. And he hasn't come down with any new mandates that I know of, or if he has, everybody's ignoring him. And he sort of looks like a beaten man. He's never looked like a winner, but especially lately, despite the win, he looks like he just had to put his dog down.
That's a sad look indeed. In looking through your latest issue of D-State Analytics at your blog site, I saw once again a theme that I never knew was going to appear, but now it's starting to get bigger and bigger in my mind, and that is what you might call the Wilhelmites or the Wilhelmines, the ones that really have been kind of seeded here from World War I era to try to extend the reign of the last German emperor, Friedrich II, Wilhelm II, who abdicated, forced to abdicate at the end of the war. But these people, they were appointed by God, not by the government. So they don't abdication doesn't really mean anything in terms of, are they still in their own minds the emperor or the heir? Um, the the Wilhelm name has become quite a lightning rod for research now, and I'm wondering how close have you been able to tie the two Wilhelms together in terms of either genealogy or close connections?
I have not. I mean, Wilhelm, it turns out to be a very common name, although I would not. I would think that there probably is a connection. What's happened with this whole sort of this whole look at Wilhelm? It really starts with the pandemic, like everything else does. Uh, and who was this guy Bill De Blasio telling everybody that they have to wear masks in restaurants? And I don't know, Bill De Blasio is really a blowhard, and comes across as a buffoon. And it's very interesting that he really is part of on the one side, the Wilhelm clan, whether it's remotely or closely related to the Kaiser. It still remains to be seen. I've been so stuck on just the mother side of the family, I really haven't dived too deep into the actual Wilhelm side of the family. So there's a Warren Wilhelm Sr. married Marie de Blasio, and they produced Mayor Bill de Blasio, also known as Warren Wilhelm Jr. And it's really been fascinating looking at the mother, because she's opened up a real can of worms, and some other additional sort of theories that are turning out to maybe connect more than I originally thought. The Marie de Blasio, as personified or is projected by her son, you almost get you try to paint the picture of an Italian grandmother cooking sauce over a hot stove in Brooklyn and yelling down to Billy to come and get your spaghetti and meatballs, and all the kids in the neighborhood cheer him on as he runs to eat dinner with Mama. But really, Marie de Blasio, and that's very typical of Brooklyn. That's sort of that's a vote getter in Brooklyn. Marie de Blasio really comes from, it looks like it's not really even sure where she's from, but she was not poor. My mother's side of the family is Italian. Nobody on my mother's side of the family went to Smith or Radcliffe during the 1930s, but Marie de Blasio did. She really managed to, whatever her source of wealth was, she went to the best schools that a woman could go to at that time. She married into the Wilhelm family, and what I see, and you'll notice some trends here. These Italian families, and I think other immigrant families, like the Irish families and the Jewish families, you have a core group and a very small number of really immigrant families who have been here a lot longer than the 1870 to 1920 wave of immigration you saw in this country, or for the Irish a little bit earlier. Almost an aristocracy of sort of immigrants come in. You have along the Italian lines, you have de Blasio. Not sure where their money came from, but Fauci's another one. Father went to Columbia and owned a pharmacy. And there's one more that really sticks out of me. In any case, these they really seem like insiders rather than the traditional immigrant that you think of stepping off the boat at Ellis Island with $7 to their name in a suitcase. These people came over here probably not because they were kicked out of Italy or their resources were not there to keep their family afloat. They're probably here for some other reason. On the Irish side, that's where we go back to Thomas Fortune Ryan. His his biography, his official biography, paints him as a young Irish waif who made it over here by the skin of his teeth, but in that great wave in the, I guess, late 1840s. But really, his family had been in this country for decades before the great Irish wave landed on the shores, and his family was actually slaveholders at one point. So there were not, they were not the indigent poor. Nevertheless, the press at the time, and the press even up to the present, would paint that picture that, look what this poor immigrant boy could do. He really had a lot of help on the way, and he seems to have help from some interesting sources. I won't go there quite yet, but there's always the Rothschilds in the back of my mind when it comes to these type of families.
How is Thomas Fortune Fay involved in the De Blasio family?
Thomas, it's just an example of another immigrant family.
Okay.
Okay, that is really plays off this idea of a poor, coming here on the wave of immigration and lifting themselves up by their bootstraps, but really Ryan, De Blasio, Fauci, Irish, Italian immigrants, and plenty of Eastern Jewish immigrants. They were already here. They were here before the waves arrived,
mm-hmm.
which is I think just interesting in itself, because it would be a very small community of wealthy Italians in the 1930s in the New York City area. They all had to know each other. Poor Italians knew each other very well, and there was a lot of them. But the small upper tier of Italians in the New York City area during the 20s, 30s, and 40s, I would think that they were all getting invited to the same weddings.
Yeah. Well, I think of my father's Harvard class, and I can look through the names on the Harvard class, and he's the only obviously Irish name in the whole class of I don't know what couple hundred people. They might have been here for a while, but they still haven't been allowed into the upper reaches, and that's what happens with so many of these families that think that they're on the chain on the upward mobility, and but then they hit a point where they're not going to be allowed into a certain club or a certain cultural event. That is the key to being part of the really wealthy class. They had these clubs in New York City. The different grades of wealth had their different classes. I mean, the different little clubs that they could go to, and that's like creating Brahmins and or dividing us between different classes of wealth. The old world, the opposite of the American dream. And these people that are kind of slipped in here as agents that are going to have somehow access to financing that the rest of us don't get access to. And that's really key, isn't it? If you've got a great idea, but you don't have financing, then you're probably never going to be famous. You're never going to mature that idea. It's worse now, but even back then, it looks to me like if you were somehow connected to a financial institution and were willing to play ball with them, then that was your ticket to rise, and not just the Horatio Alger story that is basically mythical.
Right. And I'm very surprised at how mythical it turned out to be, because I was willing to believe it for so long, but it's it's frustrating.
I can kick back and laugh on that one too. Oh boy.
But
Yeah, we it takes what it takes, but you do figure it out. We're starting to figure this out in many ways. The Mark Kulak's show earlier today, just we keep seeing that there's dark money, there's corrupt motives, and unfortunately that's gotten into our health care and into the great corporations that have so much financial backing, so much power to do good, and yet all they seem to do is to refinance their own paper, buy up the corporation buys up its own stock in order to keep the stock valuable, and then the executives know how to time the escape. I mean, I'm telling you what you already know. What do you think's going on right now? For instance, are we being set up for a big bear market for a little while to maybe uh, tone down the inflation?
Yeah, I would, I don't know. It's tough to call. I think the economy's been a wreck since the mid 2000s. They're just putting band-aids on different things all the time. I mean, I get, I guess it depends who's in charge, and I'm still not completely sure who is in charge. Um, I think I said on Twitter yesterday, it's really if you go all the way back to the creation of a Federal Reserve, and what that resulted in, you could sort of see the master plan just in that alone, in that you could conceivably deflate the entire world's wealth that 90% of the planet is holding, the middle class, the poor, by giving them paper money. So you make the paper money worthless, but meanwhile the aristocracy or the tycoons, they own the hard assets, which is not affected by inflation. Whether there's precious metals or timber or oil, they're really anti-inflationary assets, but everybody else is holding worthless money. So that's been going on for decades, but it seems to be accelerated this past year and a half, meaning that they're not going to, maybe they're not boiling the frog anymore. Maybe they're a little bit panicked here, and they're trying to force some sort of devaluation of the dollar, just so that they could ultimately end up with all the hard assets, and everybody else can be poor, and everybody else will owe them something. But that's really, it's going down a path that gets way too deep. Yeah, it's I mean, everything else is a bubble. I would say.
They seem to be able to keep on blowing bubbles. They can probably manage this one. It looks like they're trying to put together something like I see figures of 30 trillion to 100 trillion of pledges for investment in the Green New Deal. And if they can get all of that money lined up and then secure that money, then they may be able to bridge the gap between what they've done now with this incredible pumping of cash into the economy, which I don't think has even hit the economy yet. I think there's this two
No.
trillion, $3 trillion that have been pumped in. I mean, maybe a lot of it's gotten siphoned off, but it is going to hit the economy. Um, I guess another economic question is are the ports still backed up, or have you been keeping an eye
You
on?
know, I try not to go to the supermarket or shop in general, and just looking at, I was fishing this morning, and usually if the ports are backed up, you'll see the container ships off of Sandy Hook, New Jersey, or heading into the New York Harbor. There's nothing crazy going on. They're heading in and out, the same usual number. I don't think that there's much of a supply chain problem in this area. Things are more expensive, but I don't know. I don't know. Some of it might just be panicking. I just don't see it.
Yeah, our gas is gone up. It's not murderously gone up. It's been this high before, actually. But I do see that. I was talking to Harley Schlanger earlier today. He says that the cost of I guess gas is what they use is gone up, um, uh, and in some cases just astronomically. In his own case, it's gone up 14% in a month, and the trend is that it's just going to keep on going up. That, of course, is all tied up with the Nord Stream pipeline and whether they're going to be able to get that energy source from Russia or not. That's all opposed by NATO and the Atlantic Council guys, and it seems to be tied up in the EU right now. But um, just to mention the importance of energy prices in the wintertime, as we're facing a winter in which people may may be cold, and it may be a very difficult time, especially over there in Europe, but also here, like where we have these rolling blackouts now. Um, anyway, let's turn to your more recent work. You've most recent article has to do with a gentleman named of Kuhn, Kuhn.
Right.
You want to talk about him a little bit?
Sure. So I've been looking at the de Blasio's on and off for almost a year, maybe even longer than a year. And Marie de Blasio, the mother of Mayor uh, Bill de Blasio, she has a pretty extensive FBI file. She was Maria was after she, I don't know if she graduated from Radcliffe, but in '38, it would have been around '38. Anyway, she went to go work for Time Magazine, worked under Whittaker Chambers. Um, when the war started, she went to go work for the OSS in the Department of Office of War Information, essentially doing propaganda work, especially with Italian partisans, since she spoke Italian. And her boss, and I just found it out recently, but one of the references she gives to the FBI in her FBI interview in about 1953 when they were looking for communists. One of the references is this gentleman named Ferdinand Kuhn. That's a pretty unusual name, I always thought. And they really didn't pay too much attention to him. And I was finally able to go back and see who this Ferdinand Kuhn fellow is. And it turns out he was director of Office of War Information at the OSS during World War II. And he was mostly known as a writer. He was the New York Times London bureau chief in the 1930s. I believe he worked for the Washington Post. His obituary in the Washington Post is relatively unscrubbed, but he seems to be in the right place at the right time pretty often. One of the more interesting things that I came across, and again, I think this is something that the JFK research community overlooks. They overlook a lot, but this is one I thought should probably have more mentions in the databases in the Mary Farrell files. Ferdinand Kuhn was in the 1950s. He was a freelance writer, and he wrote a book for the. If I have this correct, let me just make sure. Is it Harcourt or one of the big publishers? Anyway, the publisher did. It's in the report on the webpage somewhere. Let's see. Random House. He wrote a book for Random House under the U.S. Landmarks book series. There's 122 books in this series. So it's mostly written for 7th and 8th graders, and have all kinds of historical subjects. Christopher Columbus, Paul Revere, Texas Rangers, Guadalcanal Diary was republished under the brand. But he wrote this book in 1957. In which he went to the Secret Service and says in the forward and says, I would like to do a book about the Secret Service. And it looks like Secret Service says, yeah, come on in. And they seem to give him a lot of access. And I try to point out in the article, in the context of not really seeing motorcades or presidential assassinations in 1957, it's probably a helpful book if you wanted to know what even though it's essentially a kid's book, if you want to know what the Secret Service does. There's a very nice description about a motorcade, a hypothetical motorcade, where there's 4 Secret Service agents on each bumper, and then there's 2 riding on a chase car, and there's a front car. If I was planning an assassination of a president at some point in the future, it might be helpful to have the story of the Secret Service by Ferdinand Kuhn. He also mentions actually a few Secret Service men by name, and what was probably more important and the part that you'll never actually find out about is who did he meet in the Secret Service, and what kind of intelligence could he possibly have collected from chasing down Secret Service stories over a 6-month or a 1-year period, however long he was there. you know, if you wanted to know where all the Secret Service men are stationed, or who drank too much, or who liked the women, or who got a gambling problem, uh, and that was what you were after for some nefarious purpose. Gaining access to the Secret Service for a year or so probably would have been pretty helpful. Of course, none of this necessarily means that Ferdinand Kuhn was a spy, or that anybody knew that he was a CIA or OSS agent. But he checks to all the boxes for a deep state infiltrator.
I'm sorry. I just have to record this moment in time when the light bulb went off. Okay. Yeah. And I said, oh, now I see. Okay. So this guy writes a kid's book that gives all the details of the Secret Service detail that would be guarding a limousine or a limousine in a parade of dignitaries. And he's former OSS guy?
Yes, former OSS, Office of War Information. He's in that whole upper tier of press and advisors. He's a coon. Just to cut the story short, he's a coon from the Coon Lobes.
Yeah.
He's in that family. He's that family.
That's fascinating. So there's a coon from Coon Lobes that got into the OSS during the war.
Right.
Fascinating. And that's the guy. And so he then, I wonder who his contacts are in the OSS. Is he close to the real leadership, or does he know Donovan, for instance? Is he I wonder if he's even under the control of the British at that point, with Donovan and Stevenson basically working together. Just it's a whole lot of stuff to once that light bulb goes off, my brain starts saying, "Wow, what other connections can we find from this?" That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million connections. I'll just read I just had the paragraph up from the forward, and this is written by the senior Secret Service. I guess I think he was retired, but sort of giving the tour. He says, "Secret Service did not ask that this book be written. The author, Mr. Kuhn, came to us and asked if we would furnish information about our duties and about some of our closed criminal cases. We were thus assured that the real story of the Secret Service would not be distorted." I mean, he walked in there and says, "Can I look around?" He said, "Sure." And the description of the limousine in a hypothetical presidential motorcade makes sense to me. There's also, I mean, this couldn't have been known to anybody in 1957. This is before Kennedy was shot, so nobody's thinking limousines. There's a mention of the food is inspected by the Secret Service that comes into the White House, so nobody poisons the president. Well, that's a good thing to know if you're thinking about poisoning the president. It gets inspected. You're going to knock off a junior Secret Service agent who ate a hot dog that had cyanide in it, and you're not going to knock off the president. But I mean, the Kuhn name goes back even further. Now, this is where we really get. This is where things really start to become full circle, and this is a scary part. But Ferdinand Kuhn, who they don't see his name as Ferdinand Kuhn Jr., so that means it's Ferdinand Kuhn Sr. So Ferdinand Kuhn Sr. goes worked for I believe he was a clothes merchant, and it looked like a very high end, an executive in the clothes industry. And brothers and sisters and all kinds of things. There's so many cousin marriages between the Lobes and the Kuhns, it gets confusing. But Ferdinand Kuhn Sr. shows up as the founder of a Jewish boys' camp for poor Jewish boys living on the Lower East Side in the early 1900s. So the idea is to take these boys out of the city for the summer and teach them how to fish and teach them how to live in the woods or just appreciate nature. And hopefully that's all that went on. But we know that this is a Kuhn from the Kuhn Loeb family with the the other founders. There was a Warburg was one of the founders. Mortimer Schiff was another founder. You have, I believe, the Macy's in there. You have a very interesting fellow who I want to look at, who was his name was I believe Bernard M.L. Ernst, who was a lawyer, and he was also Harry Houdini's. He was Harry Houdini's lawyer, and when Harry Houdini died, he took over the United Magicians Union back in the 1920s. But I think that's an interesting thing, interesting fellow, in that there might be some of the occult type stuff, going on there. And I reference the occult, and this is where things really go off the rail, and I'm probably going too far, but the Son of Sam case is, there's a whole bunch of new information coming out, and a YouTuber named Manny Grossman and Crowdsource the Truth, who we know, they've been covering these, taking a closer look at the Son of Sam cases, which is involved a cult in Untermeyer Park up in Yonkers. Untermeyer Park was named after, I think it's Sam Untermeyer. Somebody will tell me. Untermeyer was one of those lawyers associated with the Kuhn Loeb and Rockefeller syndicates. The Untermeyer Park has all this occultic symbiology surrounding it, and if you really want to get into some of these things, this channel by Manny Grossman, he's describing it. He has walk on the street interviews with a lot of people who were around during the 70s when these weird cults were back and forth between Westchester and Yonkers, and a lot of kids were going upstate and not necessarily coming back with happy memories. They would go to these summer camps, and it almost it might be too much of a jump, but these wealthy benefactors of summer camps with shades of the occult in there, and with the sort of the more recent revelations of the extent of the Westchester and lower New York State cult networks that existed, starts reaching into all these other avenues. Back to de Blasio, for instance. De Blasio, Marie de Blasio went to school in Mount Vernon, which is right next to Yonkers. Wealthy Italian. One of the leaders of the cult, one of the suspected leaders of the cult, is a wealthy Italian named Dr. Anaforo. They all seem to travel in these same circles, but Ferdinand Kuhn is turning out to be quite revelatory in that he was in the right place at the right time during the 1950s, and he does. And I just found this yesterday in the Warren Commission report, or the Warren Commission files, and there's millions and millions of them, JFK files. He gets one mention. And the one mention is he's asking for a copy of the Warren Report in July 1964, 3 months before it's published. I thought that was interesting. In a letter.
Yeah. Does that mean maybe he was looking to see if anybody told on him, or that he heard it as his name is in there as somebody who might suddenly become a person of interest?
Maybe other people know more about this than I do, and if they do, it'd be interesting to find out. But the Warren Report was published. It was given to President Johnson. Let me see if I have the date. It was given to President Johnson September 24, 1964. It was made public 3 days later. On July 2nd of 1964, so 3 months before, 4 months, Ferdinand is asking for a copy of the report. And it looks like other people were asking for copies of it too, including a couple of lawyers. It looks like Ruby's lawyer was asking for it. Some members of the press as well. I just wonder how many people got to look at the report and go through it and make sure their name's not in there before they gave it to Johnson, before they released it to the public. Gave it to the public. It looks like it had been ready for a while. Then he just had to proofread it.
Yeah, he definitely had contacts. If he was OSS in World War II, then he's definitely got contacts very way up that could possibly facilitate that. Absolutely. We got a number of great researchers in the chat room tonight, and I wanted to just mention some of the comments I'm seeing, and maybe you'll have something to comment on that. Here, David Underdown says Paul Warburg's son worked for Wild Bill. Mobster says Auguste Belmont's nephew was high up in the FBI. I knew there was a Belmont up there that worked with Sullivan, but did not know he was connected to Auguste Belmont, the agent of the Rothschilds. That is interesting. David Underdown says, did FDR get poisoned? Well, I don't know if that's your field or not, but it sure is a good question. Can ice cream be spiked? Well, Corky, I think you can spike anything. I was just studying last week with Mark Kulak about how they were testing hepatitis vaccines on these children that they had in this home on Staten Island in really terrible, horrible conditions. I think it was called Willowbrook, and they gave them the hepatitis virus in their chocolate milk. So yeah, I'd say they could spike just about anything they want to. Disgusting, isn't it? Yeah, they needed to have some subjects to test their ideas on, and well, I guess these kids volunteered.
Yeah, apparently. One of these days, I want to write a post just on curiosities and common themes. Maybe two posts. One's curiosities, one common themes. Common theme that I would probably put up there is these elite families have some sort of connection to China already, in that Ferdinand Kuhn's son, born in 1933, I think he just passed away relatively recently. He was pretty old. He was one of the premier experts or Western PhDs on the history of China and ancient China and modern China. And he published a lot about, he was the go-to guy if you wanted to know how the Chinese work. And I believe he lived there quite a few years. His son, Andrew, so this would be Ferdinand Kuhn's grandson, was the Beijing correspondent for NPR up until about 2 years ago, and now he's the NPR. He's the NPR correspondent, head correspondent stationed in Seoul, South Korea. But that's another person probably needs to look. Yeah, Anthony Kuhn. That's the grandson of Ferdinand. They have these connections. That I think I don't think it's a coincidence that that a lot of these have a very long history back to China. That's where your cotton came from. That's where opium came from. That's where a lot of shady dealings were going on. I happened to run into a star as well in that Kuhn family tree, as in CB Starr and what's his name? Special Prosecutor Starr, whatever.
Ken Starr.
Ken Starr. That's another one of those Chinese connected families. Yeah, the Stars are originally from Canada.
Who could ever come up with the name Vander Starr? I mean, that's just too much. I mean, Vanderbilt, and then it's George Webb's theory, or maybe it's not just a theory. Maybe he knows this for a fact that they were using just the name Starr was just a code. So if you were illiterate Chinese, or if you didn't understand English, but you had to go find something, they might tell you, well, go find the building with the star on it. And so that would say, all right, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Well, they won't be able to find Vanderbilt, so let's make him Vander Starr, and then they'll be able to go there and get their insurance premiums paid,
Right.
and everybody will be happy.
You just remind me. So there's Star, which I find in deep state family trees pretty often. Um, I find it in the ignitive files. There's the bar, Bill Bar, Stringfellow Bar, a whole bunch of bars. It seems to be a made up name. And Carr is the third one. Carr is the family that was involved with the Son of Sam killings. Uh, that's basically who was behind the Son of Sam killings, and that's been a very difficult lineage to trace. And you could almost there's some argument that it might have been formerly Czar, Czar, but I'm starting to think that the census records have been played around with, and it really is not Czar. It was always Carr, and it's just an interesting name. They pop up pretty often, just as much as Bar and Star.
One thing just to toss into your thought process there is the Scottish name of Keer, which is pronounced Carr. And a lot of times they'll pass these Eastern European refugees, often Jewish, through a Scottish name. I've noticed. So and then look at the way they've washed Bar, giving him a set of bagpipes as a child and telling him, that's your instrument. You're going to be a bagpipe player, and he believed him. He actually did it, and so now he can play the hell out of Scottish bagpipes, and
Right.
and will do so. If you even give him the slightest hint that you might be willing to listen to him play that infernal instrument. And that's the way Scottish bagpipers are. No, shut up, John. It starts going back into my musical experiences and quasi-musical experiences. But that name Carr might very well have something to do with either Scotland or England as well. I'm thinking of Carrington as another English name that we have around here. Carr was a big developer in the Washington area. I think they're the ones that did Columbia, the artificially built city between Washington and Baltimore. But they're huge developers. I see they're over at in the Carlisle complex in Alexandria now. So they're in with the big boys.
The the whole idea of washing names through immigrants' names is very interesting. In that you have millions of immigrants coming over from Eastern Europe, from Italy, from Ireland. But you think of the Eastern Europe with the strange spellings and difficult pronunciations, and you have to go phonetic. You could easily turn a Caesar into a Czar, or just like, what, I can't spell your name, we're going to call you Carr. You got too many Y's and Z's in your name. Let's just make this easy.
Yeah, tell it to the Irish. We, like every single little town that they run into, they put some stupid name on it, like Limerick.
Right.
Limerick was never an Irish word. Never. Nobody named a town after a silly rhyming scheme. But that was just it. I can't say it in Irish, but it's something like Lim Anach or something like that, and they would just butcher it and say, "Oh no, it's now Limerick."
Right.
Look, speaking of Italy, what about Livorno, which they just decided to call it Leghorn.
Right.
And when you see Leghorn in those British dispatches in the history of Britain, you can't find it on the map unless you know that it's really Livorno, which is right there, just in the kind of the armpit there between on the Mediterranean side, north of Corsica, on the coast, north of Pisa, but below the Cinque Terre.
Okay. There's this Ferdinand Kuhn is leading in a whole bunch of different directions, and it's dovetailing with some very weird connections. I like the idea of some of the things that have been said about the Son of Sam case. I had actually only really taken a look at that because of the mention of the dogs in the Son of Sam case, and then that's where I stumble onto a whole bunch of these humane societies that seem to have CIA connections, and that's where it becomes very relevant now, I believe, in that there's always been a depopulation plan, and they're just trying different things out over the years. And during the 1950s, I think that they really did make an effort to practice their eugenics and their depopulation agenda by on pets, on dogs and cats. That's sort of where they could perfect their sterilization techniques. And I think, as I mentioned on the last time I was on this show, the American Humane Association vehemently, which was formed in 1870, vehemently opposed the sterilization of dogs and cats on the grounds that they would be sterilizing people next. And in 1954, the Humane Society of the United States broke away from the American Humane Association just for that reason. And you see these humane societies, pro-sterilization humane societies, pop up all over the country. One of the earliest ones, and one of particular interest to me, was the Friends of Animals, which was formed in 1958 by a gentleman who lived in the same town that I grew up in, right down the street from Fort Monmouth. And he has a very extensive OSS background as well. And you just can't help but think that there was some very nefarious ideas were being thrown around, and during the 50s and 60s, and maybe up until the present, and what you could do with the proper sterilization techniques. There was even a one of the first humane societies in California that practiced spaying and neutering. It was a Marin County Humane Society, and they started tracking everything on computer very early in the it sounds Holocaust or IBM-esque. They started doing it in 1958, and you can see sort of the gears turning. We could use these newfangled computers that are as big as a house to start keeping track of who needs to be sterilized and who doesn't. But we'll practice on dogs and cats first, and maybe we'll give them a little bit of a barcode or a tattoo, and we'll know. We don't have to do it again.
You didn't say bark code, did you?
Yeah, that would be good, right? I don't know if barcodes were around in 1958.
No, poor little guys. That's one of your themes also, though, and I'm with you on that. So that's fascinating. The idea that they would do that. They would try. That's what do you think they're doing with these with the vaxes? They try them on monkeys. They try them. At least they used to. Now they just put them in your arm. But
right. I mean, humane societies, they're turning up every time I open up a file or get on a path. I'm finding more debauchery or dastardly deeds. There's a couple good podcasts out there about the Manson murders. Of course, Terry Melcher was in the Tate House. Was the original resident of the Tate House before the Tates moved. Tate, what's her name? Karen Tate? Somebody say the name.
Sharon
Tate. And who's her husband now? I can't even think. They're the other child molester. Anyway, Melcher. Melcher's mother was Doris Day. Doris Day started a couple different animal humane societies, and she was recruited by Cleveland Amory to run those societies, or to finance or run those societies. And Cleveland Amory is the brother of Robert Amory, the fourth guy to be the fourth CIA director to be fired over the Bay of Pigs invasion that nobody ever remembers. Robert Amory, deputy director or director of intelligence, 1954 to 1961. Try and find it on Wikipedia that he's related to. You won't find it. To Robert Amory. It doesn't mention it. Go figure.
Well, that's why we have to do all this research, and you've done a tremendous job with your blog, D State Analytics. I want to just show off these books that I got. The first one here, Deep State Death by Braided Bathrobe Belt, and the second one, a Deep State Fake Alien Invasion for Profit and Distraction. And they're fascinating, and they're full of great pictures. And I recommend them highly. You can get them at Bill's website there at dstateanalytics.com. And I would offer you the opportunity to wrap it up tonight, Bill. I'm going to close it out pretty soon. But what else? Did you have anything else on your agenda that we wanted to cover, or shall we wrap it up?
No, not necessarily. I have been, work forced me to take sort of a break from writing in this August, September period, and I finally got back into the swing of things. Every time you open up a file, you find something new, and I would say, I wish more people were opening up these files. I think of I looked at the last release of the JFK files. I think the very last release, I think, was in April of 2018. There's 18,000 pages in there. Nobody's gone through any of those pages. I mean, I'm sure some people have gone through them, but I think a lot of people are saying, oh, somebody else will go through them, or Jim Jenny, or Lisa Pease, or one of the experts will go through it and they'll tell us what's in it. They're not going through them. All the answers are probably in there. It's just a matter of
interesting
of putting the time in. I mean, it's 18,000. Nobody could possibly go through them, and they're not indexed properly just yet because that takes a while. But
can you put them on Has anybody put them on like a OCR so there could be a word index? Or
yeah, I believe the best one is probably the Mary Mary Farrell Foundation, and it's actually I was going to buy a subscription this morning, but it's like $37 a year. You get full access. You can do a couple searches without making a donation, but then it shuts you down. But you could easily do $37 a year. You could do full searches and really make the effort. And I had given this foundation a hard time at one point, but it does take time to index these old documents. They just you have to run it through the scanner a couple of times to especially if they've been purposefully smeared or left under an air conditioning drip. And one other thing I'd add, and this has been my feeling for a while, and this is where I think we could, where we have the advantage, the advantage against the dark forces, is nobody expected anybody to be able to go through 18,000 files when they were created in the 1950s or 60s, and that there was no concept of a technology that would allow you to index every single page and make connections between seemingly unrelated files and people and organizations. But the technology does allow for it now, and there's no reason why more connections shouldn't be able to be made at a much more exponentially fast pace than maybe the JFK researchers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where they had to hand read each of these documents. There's definitely a lot of interesting things in here. Eventually I think we're going to connect everything together: the pandemic to the son of Sam murders, to de Blasio, to Murphy's drug dealing family, to who knows what else. And we're all going to find it goes back to Kuhn Loeb.
And I think one day when all this stuff can be seen, it's just undeniable. We just keep on pulling it apart. You pull your part, I pull mine. Everybody pulls a few strings of the great Gordian knot, and it's going to fall apart. And it's going to be laying down there, and we're going to see that it is these same groups, families, causes that have been doing all of these different things over decades and centuries even. And it's a privilege to be part of this research effort that you're doing and everyone else is doing. So Personally, I can't thank you enough. I can't think of anything else I'd rather do for an hour on a Tuesday night than spend an hour with you and get up to date with you and then see all the great chat. One thing I picked up from Mobster is this Belmont was related to August Belmont. Now I've got to go and dig that up, and I will enjoy that very much. So, thanks again to everybody. Thank you, Bill, and I think a lot of people are going to go over and maybe join the watch party at Twitch with Neighborhood News. That'll be fun. Maybe I'll see you over there. If not, I'll see you tomorrow night with the great Mark Kulak. So we'll see you then. Bill Taylor, thanks a million, man.
Very good. Good to see you again.
All right. Good night, everybody.